Hi, my name's William Malik. I'm the Vice President for Infrastructure Strategies with Trend Micro, and I'm here to speak to you today about securing smart cities. In the course of this presentation, we'll be looking at the definition of a smart city, that is, what makes the smart city smart. We'll take a look at some of the vulnerabilities that smart cities can face. And then we'll drill down on a couple of attacks that could face smart cities both today and tomorrow. And we'll close by looking at some measures that you can take to help make sure that your smart city program reaches fruition. So let's begin by looking at the definition of a smart city. This quote was taken from a report by a Scottish government agency in 2014. And I think it's a good benchmark as to what a smart city means. A smart city integrates data and digital tech strategically to provide sustainability, citizen well-being, and economic development. This is a nice balance between what goes on for business and the economy, as well as what goes on for the individuals living in the smart city. And we'll need both focus areas to be successful in this. So specifically, what is it that makes a city smart? I mean, you can do all of those things without technology at all, if you're really, really careful. So a smart city is a system of systems. It is architected for highly available and interoperable systems. It gathers data, allowing, in some cases, AI, more often, a human governance mechanism, some people, to decide what needs to be done next. And it's made up of components such as intelligent systems, smart transport, Internet of Things enabled homes and businesses, automated support for distribution, supply chain, emergency services, and healthcare. This means there's a substantial investment in infrastructure, both installing it and maintaining it. Sensors, bridges, air quality, roads all around. We need real-time governance. And this means that it's got to be very much bidirectional. The citizen cannot be left feeling that this is being done to them. They must understand that they are part of the process. The risk is if they don't, then you will lose trustworthiness. We'll talk about that more in a little bit, but it's important. And there actually is a set of standards. ISO 37120 is the first that discuss the standards that make a smart city go. So let's take a look at this concept of the architecture of smart cities. On this diagram from Alibaba Cloud, we're looking at the ET City Brain architecture. Now, what City Brain does is it makes use of both historical and current data about traffic, about weather, about where vehicles and individuals are, and it uses that to develop a continuously updated model of the digital twin of the city, if you will. We can ask, how's things going with water distribution? How's things going with air quality? Do we have a problem with the availability of, say, deliveries of food to a certain district within the city? Is there an area that needs additional policing? Is there a traffic problem brewing? Now, this is just one model. This is an example of a model. There are others. Japan has done some amazing work on intelligent transport systems, for instance. Very good reference. In the interest of time, we don't have the latitude to go through them. We'll take a look now at the vulnerabilities that can occur in a smart city. And in this graphic, we see everything from smart cars and the associated sensors, smart homes, smart buildings, and smart grid. There's also the use of drones to do monitoring and to provide services. We see data flowing from the cloud, and in the case of GPS data, that's two-way traffic. You're giving your position back to the cloud, and the cloud is taking advantage of all that to give you information about traffic densities, for instance. We're going to take a look at specifics in smart buildings in a moment, but just to tell you about one of the attacks that can hit smart cities, where folks are using intelligent grids for power distribution, it turns out that the meters themselves in the individual homes and businesses are not that well protected. So it makes it unfortunately easy for the bad guys to modify the information that the meters are sending. For instance, creating a spurious spike in demand, which will then lead the city to purchase additional power. And as you know, power can't be stored. If it's coming in, it's got to go somewhere. And this sort of thing can cause a real problem in managing the integrity of the grid. I mean, where do you route extra power, and how do you deal with the payment when power that you actually didn't need is being sent to you at premium rates to meet a demand you don't actually have? When we look at smart buildings, we see the complexity of a smart city and microcosm. There is a lot that has to be monitored and validated in the management of a smart building. Physical conditions, access, quality of the environment, emergency services. But the important thing to think about here is not just the stuff that's going on within the smart building, but also what's going on between the smart building and the rest of the smart city. If you have a smart building, say, with instrumentation about how the various systems are working, it may tell you that an escalator has broken down. Now, the nice thing about escalators is that when they break down, they come to a stop and they lock in place. This isn't an accident. This is because the people who design escalators design them to do that. They fail safely. If you're riding on an escalator that stops working, it will come to a stop. It will not tumble you all over the place. And once it's stopped, you will be able to use it as a stairway. So a broken escalator is not a significant health or safety issue. It is a convenience problem. And so the smart building will then dispatch a message to the repair crew to get there and re-enable the smart escalator. On the other hand, if an elevator gets hung up, that's a bigger problem. Again, the engineers that design elevators are very much aware of safety concerns. Elevators don't drop, but being stuck in place means that anybody who's inside is inconvenienced. They're probably worried. They might be scared. And you want to get somebody there right away to open the door and help get them out safely and securely, and then restore the elevator to normal operations as soon as possible. The smart building will also listen for indications of possible problems. So you might have the smart building hear glass breaking, which would cause it to say, somebody dropped a coffee mug in the break room. So we'll dispatch a custodian with a bucket and a mop and a broom, and he'll sweep up whatever it was that happened. Unless the building is connected to a public safety system, in which case that broken glass could mean that a bullet has penetrated a glass window because there's a public safety issue with an active shooter on the north face of the building. And that's where information security comes in front and center. You've got to be able to trust that the information you're getting from other sources is correct, that it hasn't been altered and it hasn't been forged. And the actions you take based on that then are well-grounded and will preserve the safety of the organization. If your smart building is generating false alarms requiring people evacuate every 15 minutes, the temptation is going to be to turn off the alarm entirely, which is not a good thing. So putting these systems together will require additional authentication, authorization, data integrity, possibly data confidentiality, and possibly non-repudiation, the 5 key information security primitives in order to make these systems trustworthy and reliable. So what kind of attacks are actually happening against smart cities? Well, the usual attacks against city government, we'll talk about business email compromise, ransomware, and crypto mining, and the kinds of problems that could come up in the future will occupy a chart with a number of examples on it. One of them is right now is business email compromise. These are the kinds of individuals that are being spoofed as the sender of what turns out to be a business email compromise email. It comes from the CEO, the managing director, the GM, the president, and the chief clinical officer. Nearly 5% of our business email compromise attacks as we observed in the month of September, were from people in positions of responsibility in healthcare facilities. Very important impact on what's going on for cloud-based services in general, and certainly for city governments. When we take a look at who these emails are targeted at, surprisingly, a lot of them are aimed at professors. Universities, colleges are the victims of business email compromise often, as well as finance managers, directors of finance, customer service reps, in order to convince them to grant authorization to an inappropriate individuals, and sales, of course, to try to get them to accelerate payment of something. Ransomware target industries, banking and government. Banking's top of the list still, government going up. We see significant changes in these environments. These are worrisome trends. Again, this is taken from September's monitoring of internet-based threat activity globally. The kinds of things that are attacking home networks, the inbound-outbound groups, we see the month of September, we had closing in on 250 million attacks as seen by our smart home networks, and nearly 20 million outbound attacks arising from co-opted home networks. Cryptocurrency mining is on the way up. Telnet password attacks actually are down a bit. This is a good sign. People are patching systems. Now, when we get into the future of attacks, here are 4 examples. We have the disruption to Internet of Things environments. We have the difficulties we expect to see with 5G. And we have a general category I'll call architectural flaws, in this case talking about counters rolling over. First, to take a look at the Triton and Stuxnet style attacks. This was where an industrial asset is compromised prior to the PLC. The information is then passed along, causing the human-machine interface to think everything's fine when in fact everything is not fine. The 5G environment is very complex. The diagram on the bottom of this page shows how much more intricate the provisioning and support of 5G applications is going to be. Now understand that this isn't here yet. Right now, most organizations are working on what's called REL 14. REL 17 and 18 will have 60 or so additional functions, and REL 17 isn't going to be available as a specification to build 5G devices until the middle of next year. REL 18 probably the end of 2023. I have an entire presentation on 5G threats that I invite you to see as well. On the top right, we have an indication of a flaw that occurred in April of last year. GPS satellites, the older ones have a 10-bit counter that counts the weeks since the beginning of time. You have to know how long you've been up in order to know how far you've gone to help you figure out your position. Well, unfortunately, the beginning of time is January 1980, and these older satellites with a 10-bit counter, well, that means that after not quite 20 years, the counter rolls over. It happened in August of 1999. It was not a big deal because there were not that many systems that were connected. It happened again last year in April, and it caused the grounding of a number of new generation aircraft, Boeing Dreamliner 777, 787s. Some of them were grounded because their console was telling the pilot that it was August of 1999, and that meant that they couldn't certify the vehicles as airworthy. The last one is a kind of a funny one. This is a performance artist who decided to take 99 used cell phones, put tracking, mapping software enabled on them, and then dumped them into a wagon and walked through the streets of a major city in Germany, causing the traffic software to believe there was a massive traffic jam. Looks funny, but it tells you how serious and how easy it is to mislead the system. I could call this adversarial machine learning, but I think that's too highfalutin a title. This was just pranking the uh, traffic management software. The final chart in this section is going to talk about the trustworthiness of the environment. The picture here is an artist's rendering of what the Sidewalk Labs plan for Toronto's Quayside waterfront would have looked like. Nearly $1 billion was invested in acquiring land, planning technology, and so forth. And what ended up happening was the people who were in that area became so concerned about the magnitude of the data mining that Google would perform that despite all of the corporation's assurances, they ended up rejecting the proposal. They said, we don't want that much intelligence observing all of our movements all of the time. What the goal is here is to try to build a civic information security capability so that individuals feel that they themselves have the ability to understand what's going on. Because if people don't know what's going on, they're going to guess. And recent history has told us how rapidly conspiracy theories, no matter how obviously absurd they are, how rapidly conspiracy theories can spread and undermine the attempts to build and sustain a smart city. Civic engagement is crucial. So, what do we do to secure smart cities? Well, begin with governance. We want to make sure that people participate. We want to use technology in order to support the strength of the smart city, the trustworthiness of the environment, and we want to provide awareness. One graphic I have from this is a program that's actually being stood up in Rhode Island, where if you're in the state of Rhode Island, you can dial the local information number, which is 311, a free phone call, and you can report an information security problem if you think you're under attack. Now, the benefits of this are, first, the state's aware of attacks going on. The people staffing the site are, for the most part, college students, and so they're getting training in supporting InfoSec, and the citizens get a better sense of safety and security knowing that there is an effective organization to keep them in place. So I would encourage this kind of activity that has value globally. I'd like to take now a moment to talk about next steps. These are the kinds of things that a city manager would look at, that a city planner would look at, that a consulting organization would consider, and that vendors selling into smart cities should be aware of. The first couple of items here talk about how you make sure you're targeting the right constituencies. Okay, by constituencies, I mean groups of people who have a common set of interests. Workers want to know how to commute if commuting is on the menu. Theater goers want to know about tickets and availability. People coming into the city want to know about parking. They want to know about what areas are open to traverse. And then you identify the key services that support these various constituencies. Delivery trucks. You want to build an architectural model of the components of the smart city and understand that many of those underlying capabilities are not new. You're going to be instrumenting technology that in some cases may have been in place for a century or longer. Make sure you follow relevant standards in these initiatives, the ISO 37100 series. Make sure you understand the dependencies between the systems, because then when problems like the GPS rollover happen, you'll be able to plan for the scope of impact as these failures propagate without, hopefully, disrupting core services or defeating the safety or recoverability of the environment. We want to set up a CERT, Computer Emergency Response Team, Cyber Emergency Response Team, may be staffed by students, may be connected to a national intelligence gathering or crime fighting organization. We want to make sure that networks are segmented. We don't want to make it easy for malware to propagate through these critical networks. We want to make sure the people using the system are authenticated, People who are making decisions and changing the system should have multi-factor authentication. We don't want to use generic user IDs. We don't want to use simple passwords. And we want to make sure that users are engaged. Keep the technology current, and you have a very good chance that things will go well for you. These references helped develop this presentation. That brings me to the end of my remarks. Again, if you have questions, please work through our Trend Micro colleagues, and I will do my best to answer you in a timely fashion. Thanks for your time and attention. Enjoy the rest of the show.